Hey guys, so we are going to do something very familiar. Last time we looked at sine of theta as our parent function. This time we're going to look at cosine theta as our parent function. So these notes are going to look very similar to the last notes. So remember last time the first thing we did was we generated the parent table by looking at the unit circle. So if you guys remember, cosine is the x-coordinate on our unit circle of any point on our unit circle. So let's go to 0 on our unit circle, and let's find the cosine of 0. Well, here's 0. The cosine is the x-coordinate, so the cosine of 0 is going to be 1. Okay, guys? Now let's go to pi over 2. So up to the tippy top, we go to pi over 2. The cosine is the x-coordinate, so the cosine of pi over 2 is 0. So I'm going to put 0 here. Okay, guys, moving right along, let's now look at the cosine of pi. Well, the cosine of pi, there's pi right there. The cosine's the x-coordinate, so that's -1. The cosine of 3 pi over 2, again, now we're down to 3 pi over 2, x-coordinate 0. And then 2 pi is exactly the same. We've gone all the way around the circle. So now we're back at where we were to begin with. So let's see what this looks like. It's going to look kind of like a sine curve. But instead of starting at 0, 0, it's starting at 0, 1. So it's still going to have the same basic shape. But this time, it's going to look kind of like a parabola, even though it really isn't a parabola, because it keeps going. Obviously, it's going to keep going like that, right? So that's what a cosine parent function looks like. Oh, that is not very neat. There we go. So notice it starts at 0, 1 instead of 0, 0. So the transformations, again, guys, it's exactly the same as it was with sine, as with every other transformation. So I'm going to just quickly go through this. This is going to multiply the parent y by a. And this is going to add k to the parent y's. Okay? Remember this kind of strange thing going on with b. This I'm going to multiply the parent, and this really isn't x, now we're calling it theta, by reciprocal of b. And here we are going to add h to the parent thetas. Right? So that's just like before. If you guys remember, the amplitude is equal to the absolute value of a. How high up or how far down from that middle line does the graph go? And the period is 2 pi over b, right? So it's one cycle of the graph, and in this case it's equal to 2 pi over b. So let's look at our first example. Gotta scooch the video. Okay, so we are going to apply transformation rules to our graph here. So what we're going to do, I wrote down the parent just so we have it handy. Let's look at this equation, -3 cosine 1/2 theta minus 1. Now notice that 1 is not in the parentheses with the theta, it's tagged onto the end. So this is a k value and this is an a value. That 1/2 is a coefficient, right, in front of theta, so that's a b value. So let's do our little transformation rules here. Remember, I'm going to take the parent y's, multiply them by a, and then add k. So my little formula for each of the y's is going to be -3y minus 1. So I'm going to take all of these parents and I'm going to multiply them times -3, and then I'm going to subtract 1. So -3 times 1 is -3, minus 1 is negative 4, right? So that's going to happen 3 times here. Negative 3 times 0 is 0, minus 1 is negative 1, and negative 3 times, wait, what did I do? Negative 3 times, oh, this is negative 3 times negative 1, which is positive 3 minus 1 is 2. There we go. Okay. For b, remember it's the reciprocal of b that we're going to multiply our parent thetas by. So that means we're going to take all the parent values and multiply them times 2. So that means 2 times 0, 2 times pi over 2, 2 times pi, 2 times 3 pi over 2, and 2 times 2 pi. So 2 times 0 is 0. Now, the good thing is, guys, when you do a few of these, you start to see a pattern. Because look at this. That's going to become pi. This is going to become 2 pi. Does anyone see the pattern here? 0, pi, 2 pi. Guess what? The next one's 3 pi. And then the next one's 4 pi. So let's sketch this, see what it looks like. We're sketching 0, negative 4. Then we're sketching pi, negative 1. 2 pi, comma 2. Oop, didn't go up far enough. 3 pi, comma negative 1. And 4 pi, comma negative 4. So let's see what we got. We got this. Right, and if I wanted to, I could keep going. Put some more points in there if I wanted. Like that. Right? Okay, so there's our graph, and they also want us to identify the amplitude.
It ran out of memory.
It did?
No, it's low battery.
Will it let me finish it, you think?
It's 20%, so probably so, but
This will be the lesson.
I think you'll have to start over, right?
All the way over?
Well,
Oh, okay. They want us to find amplitude. Right? And the amplitude of this is the absolute value of A. So in this case, our amplitude is 3, and our period is equal to 2 pi over B. Well, there's B right there, right? So 2 pi over 1/2, which is 4 pi. Right? And that makes sense, right? Because our period, you can see right here. That's the period. So I can actually see it on the graph from 0 to 4 pi. Okay, chugging right along. Let's do another example. Okay, let's identify A, B, H, and K. Well, it looks like we don't have a K. We do have an A, and we've got a B, and we've got an H, right? So our formula for our y's is just going to be 4 times y. So that one's nice and simple. So let's just do 4 times all of these. 4 times 1, 4 times 0, 4 times negative 1, 4 times 0, and 4 times 1. So that's going to give me 4, 0, negative 4, 0, and 4. Now this one's a little trickier. I've got to do B times the reciprocal of B, right? And then that's going to be minus pi over 4, right? So I'm going to take all of these and I may notice a pattern after. Let's see if we can just do the first 3 and see if we notice a pattern. So 1/2 times 0 is 0. Minus pi over 4 is negative pi over 4. 1/2 times pi over 2 is 1 times pi over 2 times 2. So it's pi over 4 minus pi over 4, which is 0. And this is 1/2 pi minus 1/4 pi, which is equal to pi over 2 minus pi over 4 is equal equal to 2 pi over 4 minus pi over 4, which is pi over 4. So this is equal to pi over 4. Can anyone see the pattern? I'm going from negative pi over 4 to 0, 0 to pi over 4. What do you think comes next? Well, it's going up by pi over 4. Now I can reduce this one to pi over 2, right? So once I do the first 3, I can usually tell. So let's graph this. Negative pi over 4 comma 4, 0 comma 0, pi over 4 comma negative 4, and 3 pi, let's see, pi over 2 comma 0, and I got that. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Right, and I could keep going if I want. What's the period of this function? Well, the period is equal to the absolute value of a, which in this case is 4. Right, and, sorry, no, the amplitude, not the period. The period is equal to 2 pi over b. And b in this case is 2. So 2 pi over 2 is pi. So that's our period. Sorry, my battery's running low, so I'm rushing a little bit. Okay, guys, we're almost done. Let's look at the description. So they're saying that this time we have our parent function is cosine. So they're saying here that it's reflected across the x-axis, just like the last lesson. It doesn't say anything about vertical stretch or compression. It does tell me, though, that I have a period of pi. And if we remember, period equals 2 pi over b. So I can say that pi equals 2 pi over b. Right? So if I multiply both sides by b, I get b times pi equals 2 pi. So if I divide by pi, you guys, what's 2 pi divided by pi? 2. So I have a 2 there. They tell me I have a shift right 5 pi over 6. So it's going to be minus 5 pi over 6, and then down 3 units. So that's where I'm at. Okay, guys, this is our last one. We got to move back over. Okay, guys, we have a graph. And they're telling us they want us to, again, my graph doesn't look so good. They want us to identify the period and the amplitude. Okay? Well, we know amplitude is how high up or how low down it goes. So what's the amplitude? Well, it looks like the amplitude here is 2. Right? And the period is going to go from mountain to mountain. So the period goes from 0 to 6 pi. So our period here is 6 pi. Now let's take this information and let's write our equation, and then we're done. Again, we're assuming no h or k. So all I need to do is find the a value and the b value. Well, the amplitude is a, right? And we know our period is 6 pi. So period equals 2 pi over b. And our period is 6 pi. Right? So let's find our b value. b times 6 pi equals 2 pi. And now let's divide by 6 pi. And 2 pi divided by 6 pi is 1/3. So I can just put the 1/3 right in here. And that's it for cosine. Bye, guys.